You know, usually when we sit down here to talk about diagnosing some kind of, well, massive systemic failure in society, there's this comforting expectation of precision.
Right, like civil engineering or something.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
civil engineering. You know,
Yeah.
a bridge collapses, the structural engineers show up, they pore over the blueprints,
Uh-huh.
and they find the sheared rivet, right? They just point a laser at it and say, there, that's the point of failure. Fix the rivet, save the bridge.
Yeah, it's very clean.
It is. And we crave that kind of binary, clean diagnosis because, I mean, it makes terrifying problems feel manageable.
It's just human nature, really. We want a single villain or, a single broken gear.
Right.
We want things to be visible and easily categorized. And most importantly, easily fixable with just one policy shift. Or maybe a quick infusion of cash.
Right. Just throw money at the broken rivet.
Exactly.
But then you step into the world of modern American public education,
Right.
and suddenly that structural engineering precision, it just completely vanishes into thin air.
Oh, completely. It's gone.
We are looking at a diagnostic landscape today for you guys that is just incredibly murky. And the core mission of this deep dive, the reason we gathered all these source materials, is to try and answer one glaring, unavoidable question.
The big one.
The big one. Why is public education in such a steep, observable decline? And let me tell you, the blueprints we're looking at to answer that today,
They're messy.
they are messy, they are contradictory, they're highly charged, and frankly, they're completely overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, calling it diagnostic muddy waters doesn't even really begin to cover it.
No, it doesn't.
Because when you look at a collapsing school district, you aren't just looking at a curriculum issue or a funding shortfall.
Right, it's not just bad standardized tests.
Exactly. The sources we're digging into today argue that you're actually looking at evolutionary biology, nuclear family dynamics, the bloat of the federal bureaucracy.
Oh man, all of it.
Yeah, and massive generational cultural shifts. All of this colliding inside a single 800 square foot classroom.
And that collision is exactly what we are unpacking for you today. We have a stack of incredibly intense source material, all centered around a singular, really fascinating perspective.
It's a very unique lens.
It is. We're going to be following the writings, the observations, and the deep theoretical frameworks of an educator who is referred to in our sources simply as Papa Bear.
Which, honestly, is an incredibly fitting moniker.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you get into his protective, almost fierce posture regarding his students, I mean, Papa Bear isn't just some armchair theorist.
Right. He's not just sitting in an ivory tower.
Not at all. This is a veteran with 30 years of day in, day out teaching experience in the public education system.
30 years.
3 decades. He's watched the machinery of the school system operate from the inside out, but what makes his perspective particularly distinct and what informs the darker corners of his critique, I'd say, is his background.
Yeah, this is key.
Right. He and his family actually emigrated to the United States to escape a former communist country.
And that lived experience completely changes the lens. Because he isn't just viewing the American education system through the eyes of a frustrated teacher.
No, he's looking at it through the eyes of someone who has lived under profound state-sponsored ideological control.
He knows what societal engineering looks like when it's backed by a government.
Exactly. He's seen it firsthand. And because of that dual lens, his critique is incredibly comprehensive. He refuses to isolate the school from the broader society.
So what's the roadmap here? Because we've got a lot of ground to cover.
Well, we're going to be pulling together threads from evolutionary psychology, examining the fundamental structure of the nuclear family, then breaking down the actual pedagogical flaws of how we teach K-12, analyzing the massive footprint of the federal government. And this is where the temperature of the material really spikes, I think.
Yeah. Brace yourselves for this part.
We are going to examine a theory rooted in Cold War-era psychological warfare.
Right. Now, before we take a single step further down this path, we really need to pause and establish a crucial baseline for you, the listener.
Very important.
You trust us to break down complex topics, and part of that trust requires absolute transparency. The sources we are diving into today contain highly charged, deeply polarized political and social content.
Very polarized.
Yeah, I mean, Papa Bear's theories touch on some of the most sensitive third-rail themes across both the left-wing and right-wing political spectrums in America today.
And it is absolutely critical to state this up front. We are serving as your neutral guides through this material.
100% neutral.
We are not taking sides. We are neither endorsing nor condemning any of the viewpoints, the psychological theories, or the political stances presented by Papa Bear or the critics he cites.
Right.
Our sole job today is to impartially break down, analyze, and convey these ideas exactly as they are presented in the source text.
Exactly. Think of us as a mirror. We're just reflecting these intense arguments with as much clarity as possible so you can examine them up close.
So you can weigh their validity for yourself.
Right. We are giving you the map of this very intense terrain, but we aren't telling you where to build your house. So with that firmly established, let's look at the trajectory of Papa Bear's argument.
Where does he start?
He starts at the absolute ground floor, the biological reality of the kids sitting in the desks.
Okay.
He makes a foundational claim right out of the gate that the public education system as it operates today is fundamentally rigged to benefit girls at the direct expense of boys.
Wow. Okay, that's a strong claim.
It is. He argues that the system unapologetically focuses its teaching methodologies, its behavioral expectations, all toward women in an effort to uplift them.
Right, to help them catch up, historically speaking.
Exactly. But in doing so, he says it leaves young men entirely without the required instruction or the environment to actually navigate the world.
And he doesn't base this purely on his 30 years of anecdotal classroom observation either.
No, he grounds this really deeply.
Yeah, he grounds it in evolutionary psychology.
Yeah.
He draws heavily on the frameworks of Dr. Jordan Peterson,
Right.
arguing that there are innate biological and temperamental differences between the sexes that they cannot simply be ignored or treated as purely social constructs.
Let's pull that apart because, evolutionary psychology is a heavy term. What are the specific biological differences that Papa Bear and Peterson are pointing to in these sources? How do they define this divide?
Well, the core argument centers on a divergence in natural orientation.
Okay.
The text posits that boys, on a broad biological level, are naturally oriented toward things and systems.
Things and systems.
Yes, they're evolutionarily wired to operate within what Peterson calls dominance hierarchies.
Okay, what does that mean in a practical sense?
In a practical sense, it means young men naturally engage in competition for status. They compete for resources. They do a lot of territorial boundary testing.
Like pushing the limits.
Yeah, exactly. And this deeply ingrained biological drive, it manifests externally as aggression, incredibly high physical energy, and a huge propensity for risk-taking behaviors.
So if you watch a group of, say, 8-year-old boys left completely to their own devices on a playground,
Right.
they will almost instantly invent a game that involves physical competition. They'll establish rules, figure out who is the fastest or the strongest, and basically create a hierarchy based on that physical reality.
Precisely. They organize around the physical navigation of space and status.
Okay, so what about girls?
Girls, according to the psychological framework Papa Bear cites, are biologically oriented quite differently. Their natural orientation leans heavily toward people.
People rather than things.
Right. Their spontaneous social structures prioritize cooperation, relationship building, egalitarianism, and emotional cohesion.
Rather than the strict competitive dominance hierarchies you see with the boys.
Exactly.
Okay, I think most people who have spent any amount of time around large groups of kids can recognize those general behavioral patterns.
Sure, it's pretty observable.
But the friction comes when we take these boys, who we just established are biologically wired for constant movement, physical boundary testing, and risk.
Right.
And we drop them into the environment of a modern K-12 classroom.
Oh, it's a disaster. Because the modern classroom is arguably the most unnatural environment possible for that specific biological profile.
How so?
By its very design. The school system demands that children sit perfectly still at a desk, remain entirely quiet, and focus intensely on passive, non-physical tasks for 6 to 8 hours a day.
Think about the pure mechanical mismatch of that.
It's massive.
It's like buying a high-performance, incredibly aggressive sports car with a massive engine.
Okay, I like this analogy.
And then forcing it to only ever drive in a school zone.
Right.
You never let the car exceed 15 miles per hour. You keep the engine revving at a painfully low RPM for years.
Yeah.
And then, when the engine inevitably starts sputtering, overheating, and acting up because it's not being driven the way the engineers designed it to be driven.
You penalize the car.
Exactly. You penalize the car. You tell the car it's broken.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize the core of Papa Bear's warning, because the source text makes the case that this passive, quiet environment is neurologically incompatible with how boys are naturally wired.
Neurologically incompatible.
Yes. And this leads to a massive systemic tragedy. When a young boy expresses his natural evolutionary behavior, fidgeting, wrestling, challenging authority, needing to burn off physical energy.
Just being a boy, essentially.
Right. The institution doesn't view it as a biological imperative that needs an outlet. The institution views it as a pathology.
Wait, I want to hover on that word pathology for a second. Are the sources suggesting that we are actively taking normal evolutionary male behavior and treating it like a medical disease?
Yes.
Because that is a massive claim.
It is, but that is the exact claim. Papa Bear points out that this mismatch often results in boys being wildly misdiagnosed with behavioral issues, like ADHD.
Just because they can't sit still for 6 hours.
Exactly. Or they end up being unfairly medicated with stimulants just to force them to comply with an unnatural environment.
Wow.
When what they actually need, according to his observations, is vigorous active play, roughhousing, and sheer physical exhaustion to regulate their nervous systems.
Right, they need to run it out.
Exactly. You cannot medicate away a biological imperative to move, but the system prefers medication to accommodation.
But why? I mean, why would a school system composed of supposedly caring educators default to pathologizing little kids instead of just giving them an extra hour of recess? Or more physical education?
To understand that, you have to look at the mechanics of bureaucracies.
Okay.
A public school system is a massive, incredibly stressed bureaucracy. And the primary overriding goal of any bureaucracy is order and manageability.
That makes sense.
If you have one teacher in a room with 35 kids, it is exponentially easier for that teacher to manage the room if the gold standard of behavior is absolute stillness and quiet cooperation.
Because in a stress system, quiet looks like learning. Even if that quiet is just fearful compliance or the result of a chemical straitjacket. It looks great on an administrative walkthrough.
You've hit the nail on the head. The institution naturally favors and rewards the traits that the source text aligns with female evolutionary psychology. Sitting still, cooperating, focusing on relationship harmony.
And it punishes the male traits.
Right, because they are loud, they're disruptive, and they're hard to manage.
Wow.
Papa Bear's deepest warning in this section is about the profound danger of arrogance. The idea that an institution can simply socially engineer away millions of years of innate biological traits just because it makes the school day easier to manage.
So we have these young boys trapped in this biological pressure cooker. They are brimming with this natural, aggressive, risk-taking energy, and the school environment not only suppresses it, it actively punishes and medicalizes it.
It's a lose-lose situation for them.
It really is.
Yeah.
So if the physical space of the classroom is fundamentally failing them on a biological level, the obvious next question becomes, where is the pressure valve?
Right. Where do they go?
If a boy cannot learn how to channel, regulate, and safely express his aggressive impulses at school, where does he learn it?
And that question pushes us straight out of the school doors and directly into the living room.
Okay, shifting to the home front.
Right. Papa Bear is adamant that reforming the classroom alone is entirely insufficient. If you want male students to achieve academic and societal success, the text argues you must look at the structure of the home.
Meaning the parents.
Specifically, you have to look at the presence of an involved father.
Let's dive into this, because the sources draw a very sharp, distinct line between the roles of parents here. They don't just say kids need two parents.
Yeah, it's very specific.
They argue that an engaged father provides an essential man-making force that is entirely distinct from what a mother provides. How does Papa Bear define this dichotomy?
It's a fascinating breakdown of complementary forces, really. Papa Bear, and he references several peer-reviewed sociological studies here, argues that a mother's natural orientation is radically focused on who the child is in the present moment. Her primary function in the psychological dynamic is providing absolute comfort, care, and a secure emotional base. She is the ultimate safety net.
So if the child falls, she's the one who binds the wound and offers unconditional soothing.
Exactly. That's her primary biological and psychological role, according to these sources.
Okay, that makes sense. She establishes the baseline of safety. So what's the father doing?
The father, conversely, is radically focused on who the child could become in the future.
Oh, interesting.
His role is to introduce friction. He pushes the child out of that maternal comfort zone and drives them towards capability, resilience, and a future mission.
He's the challenger.
Yes. The father is the one who models constructive conflict. When a boy has all that raw, aggressive energy we talked about in the classroom, it is the father who teaches him how to harness it.
How does he do that?
He wrestles with the boy. He teaches him the boundaries of physical force. And he encourages the child to take measured, calculated risks.
I'm thinking about a maritime analogy here.
Let's hear it.
If the mother is the safe harbor,
Mm.
the place where the ship is tied up, protected from the wind, completely secure,
Right.
then the father is the captain who unties the ropes, takes the child out onto the open water, and teaches them how to sail directly into a storm.
That's a great way to put it.
He's the one saying, the harbor is beautiful and it's safe, but that is not what ships are built for. You are built to navigate the deep water.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. The father teaches the child how to handle the danger of the world rather than just protecting them from it entirely.
Wow. Okay, now connect that back to the classroom mismatch we just discussed. What happens when you remove that captain from a young boy's life?
Well, it's a devastating compound fracture.
Yeah.
Think about it. If a boy lacks this man-making training at home, if he doesn't have a father showing him how to regulate his risk-taking, how to engage in conflict without losing control, how to harness his aggression into something productive.
He brings that totally unregulated, chaotic energy straight into a school system that demands he sit perfectly still.
Exactly. Without the father to act as the guide and with a school system that actively punishes his biology, the boy is completely unmoored.
He's got no outlet and no map.
None. He has no physical outlet in the classroom, and he has no psychological map at home. And the source text is deeply concerned with the cascading real-world consequences of this fatherlessness.
We are not just talking about bad grades here, are we?
No, not at all. We are looking at severe systemic societal outcomes backed by decades of data.
Like what?
Drastically higher high school dropout rates, massively increased juvenile incarceration rates, and generational cycles of poverty and instability.
Because the father is also supposed to be the daily example of long-term, other-focused commitment.
Right. Exactly. He goes to work, he handles stress, he sacrifices for the family.
So without that model of delayed gratification and managed aggression, these boys are walking into the harsh realities of the adult world completely blind.
Completely blind. And the incarceration statistics directly reflect that blindness. The text argues that a massive percentage of young men in prison are simply boys who never had a father figure teach them the difference between assertive capability and destructive violence.
It is a really stark, really depressing picture of structural failure on two fronts. The home is missing the anchor, and the school is punishing the biology.
It's a perfect storm.
It really is. But Papa Bear doesn't stop his critique of the school system at the biological level, does he?
No, he goes much deeper into the mechanics of the classroom itself.
Right. He zooms in on the actual mechanical ways we are trying to teach kids.
Hmm.
Let's shift gears and look at what he calls the assembly line of education.
This is where Papa Bear's 30 years as a teacher really shine through. He looks at the pedagogical foundation of K-12 schooling and argues that the entire model is a rigid, one-size-fits-all system that is completely obsolete.
Completely outdated.
Yes, he calls the practice of grouping children solely by their age and forcing them to learn at identical paces nonsensical.
When you take a step back and really look at it, it is a bizarrely industrial way to handle human development.
It is.
I mean, we take human beings who develop at wildly different intellectual and emotional rates, and we literally bash them by their date of manufacture.
Like car parts.
Exactly.
Oh.
We put them on a conveyor belt, we ring a bell every 45 minutes, and we move them to the next station, expecting uniform results.
It is a factory model. It was designed in the late 19th and early 20th centuries to produce compliant factory workers.
And Papa Bear points out how this rigidity actively destroys individual potential.
He does. He specifically calls out union-backed policies in the text, arguing that these massive teachers' unions enforce contracts that demand this uniform pace.
So nobody can get ahead, and nobody gets the extra time they need.
Exactly. It prevents high-aptitude students from accelerating because the system cannot accommodate them, and it drags along struggling students who haven't even mastered the basics yet.
And he gives very specific examples of how this flawed pedagogy plays out, right? Like with reading instruction.
Yes, reading is a huge point of contention for him. He heavily criticizes the systemic shift away from phonics in reading instruction.
Phonics being sounding out the letters.
Right. For decades, education experts pushed what they called whole language or balanced literacy approaches.
What is that exactly?
Well, it involved teaching kids to guess words based on context or pictures. rather than sounding out the mechanical structure of the letters.
Guessing words. That sounds terrible.
Papa Bear argues this shift was disastrous. He says it left a massive percentage of students functionally illiterate because they were never given the fundamental mechanics of reading.
So they're just guessing their way through books.
Exactly, and eventually the pictures disappear and they can't read.
Wow. Now, he also brings up a very controversial point regarding special education.
He does. He addresses the modern push for mainstreaming or full inclusion.
Which is what?
It's the practice of placing special education students, sometimes with profound behavioral or cognitive challenges, into general education classrooms.
Okay, and what's his take on that?
Well, while the intention might be socially noble, Papa Bear argues that in practice, it does not produce positive academic results.
Why not?
Because it often severely disrupts the learning environment for the rest of the class. It heavily dilutes the teacher's ability to focus on the core curriculum.
Because they're managing a crisis.
Right. And meanwhile, the special needs student rarely gets the highly specialized attention they actually require. It's lose-lose.
So we have an archaic factory model, failed reading strategies, and a classroom environment stretched to the breaking point.
That's the baseline, yeah.
But Papa Bear argues that while the schools are failing at these basic academic mandates, they are pouring immense resources into something else entirely.
Yes. And this is where he aligns again with Jordan Peterson.
The ideological stuff.
Exactly. The source text takes direct aim at the modern incorporation of ideological frameworks into the classroom. Specifically, Papa Bear warns about the intense focus on gender politics, DEI, which is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiatives, and CRT, or Critical Race Theory concepts.
Now, proponents of those frameworks, they argue they are just teaching accurate history and promoting empathy. How does Papa Bear view them?
He views the integration of these concepts not as academic instruction, but as outright social conditioning.
Social conditioning.
Right. The argument is that schools have abandoned teaching kids how to think, how to logically dissect an argument, how to analyze evidence.
Lyrical thinking.
Yes. And they've replaced it with teaching them what to think.
I see.
He believes schools should be intensely, exclusively focused on fundamental core knowledge, classical cultural literacy, and critical thinking skills, entirely devoid of ideological purity tests from either side of the political aisle.
Because if the school is spending hours a week on social conditioning, while a huge chunk of the 8th grade can't read at grade level or do basic algebra, there's a fundamental misalignment of purpose.
A massive misalignment.
So we've outlined a massive amount of failure here. The reading, the structure, the ideology, what is his solution?
Right.
How do we break the assembly line?
He advocates for two major structural overhauls. First, on a technological level, he believes we finally have the tools to destroy the age-graded factory model.
Oh, using technology.
Right.
Yeah.
He pushes for self-paced learning software, where students progress through material based purely on their individual aptitude and mastery.
So decoupling age from the grade level.
Exactly. If a 10-year-old boy is brilliant at math, let the software take him to calculus.
Let him run.
Yes. And if he struggles with reading, let him spend the time he needs on phonics without the stigma of failing his grade level or being held back with younger kids.
That makes perfect sense. Use technology to personalize the education. What is the second solution?
The second solution is much broader, highly debated, and aggressively fought by the educational establishment.
Okay, here we go.
School vouchers.
Okay, let's really dig into this because vouchers are a massive flashpoint in politics right now.
Huge!
For you, the listener, who might not know the exact mechanics, a school voucher is essentially a government-funded scholarship. It allows a family to take the tax dollars that the state has allocated for their child's public education and instead use that money to pay tuition at a private school, a charter school, or even fund homeschooling.
Exactly. The money follows the child, rather than automatically flowing to the local geographic public school.
Right.
And Papa Bear argues that vouchers are the silver bullet because they introduce the one thing public education currently lacks entirely.
Which is?
Competition.
Ah.
He argues that right now, public schools operate as geographic monopolies. They have zero financial incentive to improve because they get the tax money regardless of how terribly they perform.
I understand the free market logic there. If a restaurant serves terrible food, people stop going, the restaurant goes bankrupt, and a better restaurant takes its place.
Exactly the same principle.
But I have to push back on this on behalf of the kids who can't leave.
Okay, let's hear the pushback.
If we implement vouchers on a massive scale, and all the engaged parents with the resources to drive their kids to private schools, pull their funding out. Aren't we just handing out lifeboats to the lucky few while letting the massive hull of the public education system sink to the bottom of the ocean with the most vulnerable kids still trapped inside?
That is the defining tension of the voucher debate. You are articulating the exact fear of the critics.
It seems like a valid fear.
It is. But let's explore the why behind Papa Bear's counter-argument. He would argue that the ship is already sinking.
Okay.
And the bureaucracy, refuses to fix the hole because they don't have to. The public school monopoly means that for the vast majority of working-class families, your zip code dictates your child's destiny.
Which is true. If your local school is failing, you have no recourse.
Unless you are wealthy enough to move to a better zip code or pay private tuition out of pocket.
Right.
Papa Bear argues that vouchers actually increase academic equality by giving poor families the exact same purchasing power and choice that rich families already have.
Leveling the playing field.
Right. And regarding the sinking ship analogy, his argument is that the threat of a mass exodus is the only thing that will force the bureaucracy to actually reform.
Oh, I see.
If half the students leave and the funding walks out the door with them, the public school administration suddenly has to answer for why the building is empty.
They start losing jobs.
Yes, they are forced by market pressure to abandon the flawed whole language reading programs, drop the ideological conditioning, and actually offer a rigorous academic product to win those families back.
It's the idea that competition is the rising tide that lifts all boats.
Exactly.
But it begs a really fascinating question. If these classroom methods are so visibly failing, if test scores have been stagnant for decades, if parents are angry, if the reading strategies don't work, why does the system resist change so fiercely?
Great question.
Why doesn't the local school board just look at the data and say, hey, let's go back to basics? To answer that, Papa Bear says we have to look past the local school board. We have to look all the way to the top of the food chain.
Which brings us to a massive shift in the scope of our deep dive.
Yeah, we are moving up.
We're moving from the classroom to the federal government. Let's examine the bureaucratic behemoth, the United States Department of Education.
Now, I think a lot of people assume the federal government has always run the schools, but the source text gives us a vital history lesson here.
A very recent history lesson.
Yeah. For the vast majority of American history, education was strictly a state and local responsibility. The community funded the school, the community hired the teachers, and the community decided what values were taught.
Hyper-local control.
Exactly. But that fundamental localized structure changed in 1979.
Yes. In 1979, under President Jimmy Carter, the federal government officially established the Department of Education as a massive cabinet-level agency.
Right.
And the mechanism of control they instituted is vital to understand because it explains the paralysis we see today. The federal government in Washington, D.C. doesn't directly run your local elementary school in Ohio or Texas.
No, they don't hire your principal. So how do they exert so much control?
Through the power of the purse.
The money.
Always the money. The federal government provides massive grants and funding to the states, but that funding comes with thousands of strings attached. It is tied to incredibly complex, dense administrative rules, compliance mandates, and reporting requirements.
So think about your own local school district for a second. You go to the ballot box and vote for a property tax levy because the district says they need new lab equipment for the chemistry classes.
Right.
You think you're buying microscopes. But what Papa Bear is describing is a system where a massive chunk of those resources, time, money, and administrative personnel, is instantly evaporated.
Diverted.
Yes, diverted away from the factory floor of the classroom and redirected toward fulfilling compliance paperwork demanded by Washington.
It's an incredible drain on efficiency. Imagine a microchip manufacturing company. The company exists to build microchips. But suddenly, the corporate HR and compliance department at headquarters becomes so massively bloated and starts demanding so many daily diversity audits, safety reports, and structural compliance forms from the factory floor that the engineers spend 80% of their day filling out paperwork.
So they stop building microchips.
Exactly. The bureaucracy becomes so obsessed with sustaining its own compliance loop that it completely forgets how to manufacture the product.
That is exactly what it feels like when you talk to modern teachers.
Ask any teacher.
They spend half their weekends filling out administrative data tracking forms that have zero impact on how they teach a child to read on Monday morning.
Zero impact.
And since we've had this Department of Education since 1979, we have decades of track record to evaluate. What are the tangible results of federalizing education?
According to the critics and policymakers cited in the text, the track record is a profound, incredibly expensive failure.
It's a total failure.
Yeah. We have created an agency that doesn't hire a single teacher, doesn't establish the daily curriculum, and doesn't run the operations of a single school building.
Right.
Yet, despite trillions of dollars of federal spending and intervention over the last 4 decades, long-term national test scores in core subjects like math and reading have either completely stagnated or actively declined.
Trillions of dollars for declining schools.
Yes. Furthermore, the agency is responsible for managing the federal student loan portfolio, which the text highlights as a grossly mismanaged, multi-trillion-dollar economic crisis of its own.
So let me get this straight. We have a federal agency that spends billions of taxpayer dollars, buries local schools in administrative paperwork, totally dilutes local community control, and yields demonstrably worse academic results.
That's the summary, yes.
Why on earth do we tolerate this? Why do politicians on both sides of the aisle allow this broken machinery to persist?
Because of the political weaponization of the department. Exactly. Papa Bear points out that when you centralize power over the minds of 50 million children at the federal level, it becomes an incredibly efficient, irresistible vehicle for whoever happens to sit in the Oval Office.
It's a single lever they can pull to affect every school in the country at once.
Exactly. Regardless of their political affiliation, the administration in power weaponizes the Department of Education to push down their specific social and political agendas.
So every 4 to 8 years, the agenda whipsaws back and forth.
Yes. And the text argues that politics and education are a toxic recipe. When the locus of control shifts from the local community, the parents who love the kids and the teachers who know their names, to a distant, unaccountable bureaucracy in Washington, the priority fundamentally shifts. The priority is no longer lifting up core academic outcomes. The priority becomes enforcing ideological compliance.
The bureaucracy exists to sustain itself.
Always.
Okay, so let's recap where we are. We have boys whose fundamental biology is being punished and medicated. We have homes lacking the crucial stabilizing force of a father.
Right.
We have classrooms clinging to archaic assembly line pedagogy and replacing core academics with ideological conditioning.
Yes.
And we have a massive federal bureaucracy draining resources to push political agendas instead of teaching kids how to read.
It's a bleak picture.
It is a grim, almost apocalyptic picture of institutional failure.
It is. But here is where the deep dive takes a turn into truly unsettling territory.
Yeah, this is the part that gave me chills.
Because Papa Bear looks at this entire landscape of failure, and he asks a terrifying question.
And this is the pivot, he asks. If the United States is pouring more money per student into education than almost any other nation on earth, and we have this massive, powerful bureaucratic apparatus, why are we being so drastically outperformed academically by smaller, less wealthy countries?
Right. Why are we failing so hard?
Is this just a case of historic, bumbling bureaucratic incompetence?
Right.
Or, and this is the scary part, is this collapse happening by design?
To answer that question, Papa Bear relies heavily on the lived trauma of his past.
His childhood in a communist country.
Remember, his family fled a communist regime. He has lived through state-sponsored propaganda. He knows what a society looks like when the state decides to engineer the minds of its citizens.
Right.
He recognizes the social cues. And he connects the decay he is witnessing in the American K-12 system today directly to a chilling 1985 television interview with a man named Yuri Bezmenov.
Now, for you guys listening who haven't stumbled down this particular historical rabbit hole, who was Yuri Bezmenov?
So Yuri Bezmenov was actually a former KGB agent.
Okay.
Yeah, he worked primarily in propaganda, and he eventually defected to the West.
Right.
And in this interview from 1985, which, has gained a massive traction lately, he detailed this very specific operational strategy used by the Soviets.
It's a Cold War tactic.
Exactly, because, he explained that true intelligence work wasn't actually about, James Bond-style espionage.
Right, not stealing nuclear codes or blowing up dredges.
No, not at all. It was about a strategy of psychological warfare, which the KGB referred to as ideological subversion.
Ideological subversion.
Yes. And Papa Bear's core thesis in this final section is that this exact strategy is currently actively being implemented on American citizens today, legitimately, overtly, and in plain daylight, largely through the education system.
I want to break this down carefully because ideological subversion sounds like a phrase from a Tom Clancy spy novel.
It does sound like fiction.
It does, but the way the source material describes it, it is terrifyingly practical. What is the actual stated goal of ideological subversion?
According to Bezmenov, the ultimate goal of subversion is to change the perception of reality for every American citizen to such an extreme extent that despite having access to an absolute abundance of factual information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions.
Let that sink in for a second. The goal isn't to hide the truth. The goal is to change your perception of reality so completely that even when I hand you a stack of verified facts, you literally lack the cognitive ability to make a sensible decision.
Exactly. The goal is to make the populace psychologically incapable of defending themselves, their families, their communities, or their country.
Wow.
It's about paralyzing a society's ability to act in its own best interest because the citizens can no longer agree on what reality even is. Basic truths become subjective.
It makes me think of a computer virus.
How so?
But it's not a dramatic ransomware attack that just comes in, locks your screen, and deletes all your files overnight. Because if that happened, you'd immediately know you were under attack and you'd fight back.
Right, you'd call IT immediately.
Exactly. Ideological subversion is like a virus that infects your hard drive, sits there completely silently for decades, and just slowly, subtly changes one single word in your documents every few days.
Oh, that's insidious.
Yeah. By the time you realize you've been hacked 20 years later, you don't even remember what the original truth looked like. You can't trust your own memory. You can't trust your own hard drive.
That is an incredibly accurate, chilling analogy for the process Bezmenov described. It is a slow, multi-generational rot. And Bezmenov didn't just speak in vague theories. He broke this strategy of subversion down into 4 very specific chronological stages.
Let's walk through these 4 stages in detail, because this timeline is where Papa Bear connects the geopolitical theory directly back to his critique of the modern American classroom. Stage 1.
Stage 1 is called demoralization, and Bezmenov gave a very specific timeline for this phase. He said it takes exactly 15 to 20 years.
Wait, I need to push back on that timeline. 15 to 20 years feels too neat, too perfectly packaged for a messy sociological shift. Why that specific rigid window? Is there a biological reason, or is it purely arbitrary?
It is not arbitrary at all. 15 to 20 years is the exact amount of time required to educate one single generation of students, from preschool through university.
Oh, why?
Yeah. This is why Papa Bear argues the education system is ground zero for subversion. The KGB knew you couldn't change minds of the adults. You had to wait for their children to go through the school system.
You hijack the pipeline.
Exactly. During this demoralization phase, according to the source, the students of your enemy, in this case American youth, are slowly fed Marxist ideology or ideological frameworks that intentionally fracture societal cohesion.
Like the CRT and gender politics stuff Papa Bear was complaining about earlier.
Right, that's his parallel. Crucially, this information is not counterbalanced by the traditional values of Americanism, patriotism, or classical liberal traditions.
So it's an indoctrination via omission just as much as commission. You don't necessarily have to teach them to hate the country. You just stop teaching them the foundational principles of why the country is worth defending.
You remove the cultural immune system.
That's terrifying.
And the source text makes a very pointed historical claim here that ties the timeline together. It argues that the radicalized anti-establishment youth of the 1960s, the ones who were subjected to early ideological shifts in the universities.
The hippie generation.
Right. They didn't just fade away, they grew up. And they eventually occupied the positions of power in government, in the media, and crucially, in the educational administrative state.
They became the tenured professors, superintendents, the people writing the curriculum in the Department of Education.
Right. And according to Bezmenov's timeline, at stage 1, the total demoralization of the United States, where the population no longer understands its own history or values, is already considered complete.
Already complete. Wow. Okay, so if the software is corrupted and demoralization is complete, what is stage 2?
Stage 2 is called destabilization. Because the population is already demoralized and confused about their own reality, this phase is much faster. It typically only takes 2 to 5 years.
2 to 5 years.
Yeah. In this stage, the subverter stops worrying about changing minds and focuses entirely on destabilizing the essential physical structures of the nation.
What kind of structures are we talking about?
The economy, foreign relations, and defense systems. You target the physical and economic security of the country.
So how do they do that?
You implement policies that create hyperinflation. You intentionally disrupt supply chains, you weaken the nation's international standing, and you hollow out the military.
Making everything fragile.
Exactly. You make the everyday physical reality of living in the country incredibly precarious and stressful. And the demoralized population, stripped of their cultural immune system, lacks the cohesion to fix the structural decay.
Because they can't even agree on what the problem is.
Right.
So you've corrupted the psychological software in stage 1, and in stage 2, you start physically dismantling the hardware of the society. That brings us to stage 3.
Stage 3 is the crisis stage. And this happens blindingly fast. Bezmirov said it takes approximately 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Yes. The goal here is to bring the destabilized, economically precarious, demoralized nation to the absolute verge of a catastrophic crisis.
Like what? What triggers it?
This could be a massive economic collapse, a nationwide civil unrest event, or a sudden, devastating kinetic conflict. You introduce a shock to the system that shatters whatever fragile structures are left.
And what happens after the crisis? Does the subverting nation just roll tanks across the border and take over?
No, the final stage is much more insidious than a military invasion. Stage 4 is called normalization, and unlike the other stages, which have strict timelines, this period is indefinite.
Normalization. That word sounds almost peaceful, like things are finally settling down.
It's the peace of the graveyard.
Oh.
Yeah. Normalization is the chilling period when the resulting chaos, decay, and loss of liberty are made to look entirely normal to the surviving populace.
Okay, unpack that for me.
This is where Papa Bear's trauma of escaping communism deeply informs his analysis of America. In the normalization stage, you see a total, irreversible erosion of trust in all public institutions.
Nobody trusts the government, the media, the schools.
Exactly. The public skepticism leads to total civic disengagement. The citizens become completely desensitized to violence, crime, and disorder in their streets because it is simply an everyday occurrence.
They don't fight it anymore. They just accept it as the cost of living. Like, oh, the grocery store was looted again. Oh, well, that's just life in the city.
Exactly. You see the total weakening of social cohesion as communities become hopelessly fragmented, tribal, and polarized.
Which sounds very familiar.
Very. Moral standards decline sharply, resulting in widespread ethical ambiguity and massive corruption at every level of society, from local mayors to federal judges.
And people just shrug.
Right. The citizens are perpetually overwhelmed by increased fear and anxiety, which completely hinders social progress, innovation, or any unified patriotic attempt to fix the root problems.
It is learned helplessness on a national macro scale.
Yes. And here is the terrifying part, where the entire theory circles back and connects to everything we discussed in sections 1 through 4 about the schools.
How does it connect back?
In the normalization stage, the education system is fundamentally disrupted. The capacity for critical thinking among the youth diminishes drastically because the schools are entirely focused on compliance and ideology.
And when critical thinking diminishes, when you stop teaching phonics, when you medicate the boys into submission, you destroy the intellectual resilience of the next generation.
Precisely. It becomes a self-sustaining cycle of societal collapse. The diminished critical thinking in the normalized stage perfectly primes the next generation for an even easier, faster demoralization phase.
The system simply eats itself from the inside out.
It does.
So bringing all these massive threads together, Papa Bear isn't just a grumpy teacher saying, hey, the math scores are lower than they were in 1995.
No, his argument is much larger than that.
He is looking at the biological mismatch for young men, the catastrophic absence of the father in the home, the ideological conditioning replacing foundational academics, and the bloated political weaponization of the Department of Education.
And he's putting it all in a historical context.
Right. And he is saying, this is not an accident. This isn't just the result of well-intentioned bureaucratic incompetence. This looks exactly, step by step, like the Cold War playbook for demoralizing a generation so deeply that they completely forget how to defend their own society.
That is the comprehensive, staggering weight of his critique. He is arguing, with 30 years of classroom experience backing him up, that the steep decline of American public education is not a bug in the system.
It's a feature.
He is terrified that it might actually be a feature of a much larger, deliberate, subversive design.
Okay, wow. We have covered an absolutely massive amount of ground today for you guys.
So much ground.
Let's do a quick map of the journey we just took to help solidify this.
Sure, a recap is a good idea.
We started at the biological foundation, exploring how an educational system that demands passive stillness fundamentally fails the aggressive, evolutionary, risk-taking nature of boys leading to over-medication and pathologizing normal behavior.
Right. We then move to the home, detailing the peer-reviewed argument that an involved father is an irreplaceable man-making force.
And how they model constructive conflict.
Exactly. We explored how fathers are necessary to guide that biological aggression into constructive capability, and how fatherlessness leads directly to severe societal instability, incarceration, and dropouts.
From there, we examined the physical classroom and the structural failures of K-12 education. The archaic, rigid, one-size-fits-all assembly line model.
Factory schools.
Yeah. We discussed the pedagogical failure of moving away from phonics, the challenges of mainstreaming special education, the shift toward ideological frameworks like DEI and CRT, and the massive debate over using school vouchers to introduce free market competition to a failing monopoly.
We then traced the power structure upwards, looking at the 1979 creation of the U.S. Department of Education.
Carter's administration.
Right. We examined how centralized federal funding prioritizes administrative compliance and political agendas over actual classroom instruction, resulting in decades of stagnant test scores despite massive spending.
And finally, we ended with Papa Bear's chilling historical parallel. Yuri Bezmenov's theory of ideological subversion, where the education system itself is the primary vector for a multi-generational strategy of demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and normalization.
That's the full picture. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to gently remind you, the listener, of the baseline we established at the very beginning of the show.
Crucial point here.
Yes. We have explored some incredibly intense, highly polarizing, and deeply charged theories today. Papa Bear's perspective touches every political nerve in the country.
Both left and right.
Exactly. Our goal was strictly to act as a mirror to his sources. We provided a detailed, granular view of his arguments, not validating or condemning them, so that you can weigh this information independently. Look at the schools in your own community and think critically about the state of the systems around you.
Absolutely. The goal of this show is always to give you the map, to explain the terrain, not to tell you where to drive the car.
Well said.
But I do want to leave you with one final lingering question to ponder on your own. A thought experiment that builds on everything we've just discussed, from the classroom to the KGB.
Let's hear it.
Think back to the very beginning of our conversation, to that metaphor of the structural engineer, the broken bridge, and the need for a precise diagnosis.
Right, the sheared rivet.
Right. If Bezmenov's ultimate stage of subversion is normalization, a terrifying state where systemic chaos, academic failure, and societal confusion are made to look entirely normal to the populace, how would a society even realize it was time to fix its schools if it has completely forgotten what a functioning education system looks like in the first place? If the diagnostic X-ray machine itself has been subtly recalibrated over 20 years to show a broken bone is perfectly healthy, how do you ever know you need a cast?